Now, the reformist vision is formulated by him, and he is has internationally high reputation. His efforts strengthens our stance. Now I would like to invite a very important leader to the floor. Yes, I know who I'm inviting, but anyways, I would like to take a few more seconds to explain what these great leaders have achieved. So he's not there to establish the financial stability, but is also exerting its great efforts to increase the tourism, global tourism centeredness of attraction of Turkey, so that Turkey would become a strong actor in the business. He's a visionary leader. He has kindly provided his inputs to the dynamism of the business. With a big round of applause, I would like to invite Mehmet Şimşek, the Minister of Treasury and Finance. Distinguished Deputy President, Vice President, distinguished participants, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of press, I would like to extend my regards to each and every one of you. We are here in this very meaningful meeting, and I'm so happy to be with you. So this is a tourism investment summit. With your kind permission, I would like to elaborate on why one should invest in Turkey. So I have a presentation to make. So feel free to follow my speech thanks to my presentation, which is prepared in English. So without taking much of your time, I would like to explain why Turkey is a very important destination for investment. So what we have been doing in order to fortify the macroeconomic stability. Where are the opportunities? So these are some of the questions that I will answer thanks to my presentation. Coincidentally, we held a meeting with the Minister of Culture at our Ministry of Treasury and Finance. We wanted to find out, thanks to this meeting, how we can support tourism investors. At the end of the day, you are exporters, and we were trying to find out what we can do based on loans, and they have kindly conveyed the problems of the sector. We have tried to find out what we can do on export rediscount credits, loans, and as the Ministry of Treasury and Finance, this is what we have been working on. Hopefully, in the coming weeks, thanks to the Minister of Tourism or the President, we will take firm steps. Actually, I do not comment on the uncompleted initiatives, but we will do our best. So with your permission, I would like to proceed with my presentation. Why one would invest in Turkey? Of course, in order to realize our potential, in order to fulfill our potential. What kind of challenges are unblocked, and the structural transformation is the biggest part of it. Why one should invest in it? Of course, let me start with a joke, because we are at the center of the world. That is why one should make investment in our country, but that's not what I'm trying to say. Yes, as a matter of fact, Turkey is one of the biggest economies globally. So 90 million is the population approximately. $1.3 trillion is the GDP based on the current FX rates. And per capita GDP by this year has exceeded 15,000. There are a few countries like that, and Turkey is a few of those, and Turkey is one of the countries that meet these requirements. So in order to make a comparison, so let me elaborate on how big, how sizable is our country. So according to some calculations, population is more than 17 EU members. According to some calculations, it is more than 15 to 17 or 13 countries of the EU. But looking at the indices, it's a relatively big country. Your economy might be big, but what kind of linkage is there? what kind of connectivity is there. So in our geography, of course, we have customs union. We have ties with Balkans historically. We have proximity with Balkans. Similarly, this is the case for Middle East and North Africa, etc. But at the end of the day, in our region, we are a great economy, honestly speaking, and we are a fastly growing economy. So looking at the latest economy, 4.8% is the average growth rate. Maybe our rate is not at that of China, but we are one of the fastest growing countries. Looking at the past 20 to 22 years as an average, the real growth is 5.5. So when you make this comparison with the other regions, what kind of curve does it correspond to? So we have taken the levels of 20 years ago in real sense. So Turkey has increased its stance above 100. So except from China and India, the developing countries have increased their stance to 238, so we're performing much better. But if you would include China and India, despite their presence, Turkey's performance is quite good, honestly speaking. And Turkey is not a big economy, but it is at the same time is one of the fastly growing countries. This is why one should invest in Turkey. Is that enough? Of course not. We have prioritized infrastructures in the past 20 years. 220 billion US dollars have been invested in, and this year this number would increase to 300 billion US dollars with a perspective of 20 to 30 years. At least another segment of 200 billion will be invested in. So it means that Turkey has good investment. Turkey has a big market, which is growing so well, and it has good infrastructure. According to the World Bank Logistic Index, we rank the 38 out. So we're performing much better compared to the most developed countries, and they are 95 of them. Of course, we have prioritized highway network, which used to be weak. It used to have multiple lanes. They used to be called as highways, multi-lane highways. They used to be weak 20 years ago. Of course, the map is way better. As you can see, these two comparative maps can show you how we have covered as a distance. The other thing is the railroads. Of course, we have invested quite enough in airports and the highways. So we have increased the network, airport and highway networks by three folds. But we are now prioritizing the railways with high speed and electrification. Facilities should also be there, so because it's very important from the perspective of sustainability and competitiveness. This is one of the ways to decrease our carbon footprint. So it is going to also increase our competitive edge in the organized industrial zones. We want to have the connectivity of the zones to the ports through the railways. Energy transformation is another priority of ours. The renewable energy share in the whole installed energy has reached to 59% by November. This is a tremendous achievement, but this is not enough. It's going to reach up to 60%, but this is not enough for us. So predominantly nuclear and renewable energy is expected to be the predominant capacity of the installed energy network, because we want to reduce the carbon footprint by 2053. We want to reach our net zero target. In terms of skilled HR, Turkey is a great country. Every year, more than 900,000 people graduate from university, and 430 people graduate from the technical school. So when you invest in Turkey, you would have good quality, skilled HR. There's no bottleneck over there. So when you compare our situation with the similar countries, we're performing quite well. So we don't have any problem. Is it what it means? No, we have lots of problems. Of course, macroeconomically speaking, Turkey has lots of problems. And in order to solve these problems, we are implementing a program. With your kind permission, I would like to elaborate on our perspective concerning this program. Let me underline the fact that very fundamentally, a lot of macro problems are solved in a way better way than what we have targeted. Actually, we're facing inflation rates. The permanent drop in inflation rate will continue. So it means that in year 2025, a drop in inflation will continue strongly. I will explain the reasons why. But let me explain what kind of problems we have solved, and then I will go towards the more challenging problems, current account deficit. So last year, by the midst of last year, current account deficit used to be a very big problem. Why? Approximately 5.5% of the GDP used to be the rate of the current account deficit, which was so difficult to cope up with. And we have dropped to less than 1% of the GDP. So current account deficit is no longer a concern point of concern. So the export of services, meaning tourism, has a great share. Of course, export of supplies has a slight increase, but the greatest advancement here is thanks to the drop on the side of the imports. So this is why, in order to make it permanent, the structural transformation is needed. But this is what we have achieved in energy. So transformation in energy is going to permanently keep the current account deficit low, which means that there is going to be stability in Turkish lira. So macro financially, this is equal to the stability of Turkey. In the recent years, the average of the 2 decades is around 24%. So it is going to be less than 2% in the coming years. In terms of international reserves, we used to have some concerns, which we have removed. They're no longer there any longer. Net reserves, excluding swaps, were increased by $105 billion, and the reserve satisfaction level has been reached. So disinflation is our biggest target, in such a way to make it 1 digit in inflation rate. This is our biggest target. So this year, 44 to 45%, this is what it seems. This is going to be the year-end inflation rate. Of course, this is a little bit higher than what we targeted, because unfortunately there's a huge stiffness in the services inflation. It's going to consume some time to break this stiffness. This is much higher than what we have envisaged. This is the case for the education and the rental properties. But in 2025, the inflation is going to drop. Why? The monetary policies will have delayed effects, which will be felt later. Number B, fiscal policies will be much tighter, so the budget deficit will be much smaller. This drop in budget deficit and the tight stance in monetary policies will be supporting the disinflation. On the side of the revenues policies, we are going to have a much more reasonable path to take, and the state-controlled prices will be in proportion with the budget, which is going to be very important. As long as the budget allows us, we are going to be in parallelism with the targeted inflation. So it means that the disinflation process is time-consuming, not only in Turkey, but also in the rest of the world. Before the shock, in order to decrease the inflation to the times of the before the shock, it would consume 3 to 4 years. In the past 2 to 3 years, we are going to decrease the inflation rate to the 1-digit levels, which is going to be equal to the rates of pre-shock time. So in 2025, apart from what we are targeting, the base effect, we are going to drop it furthermore. Of course, the earthquakes and the expenditures arising from the earthquakes will be felt much more. 1.6% was what we have felt in the budget, and it used to be 5.5 compared to the developed countries. And the public deficit in the GDP was dropped to 26%. So there's only one reason that we're doing. So we want to support the Central Bank of Turkey in disinflation policies, so that also we want to allocate some resources to the structural processes. And against the shocks, we want to spare some fiscal sphere against the shocks. So we want to decrease the budget deficit less than 3%. When it comes to FX rates, as a matter of fact, the volatility in TL is now a bit more stable. Before the effectuation of the program, we used to be way outside the curve of the developing countries. Now we are in the same bandwidth of almost the developing countries. We're in the middle or in the bottom of the bandwidth owned by the developing countries. When it comes to structural reforms, of course, they're going to be there to trigger our potential. Up until now, in order to make the attainments that we have collected until now, we have to have the structural transformation, which is a sine qua non for us. So what do we mean by it? Transformation in industry. That's what we mean. In terms of industrial culture, in terms of in terms of collection of industrial culture, we're much better. Why aren't we richer? Because we have to increase our levels in terms of value added to be created. In comparison to per capita income, the manufacturing, the share of the manufacturing business in the total has to be increased, which means that we need to create much more high-tech products. We need to produce more high-tech products. And we have a program to do it. One part of it is spared for HIT 30. It means that until 2030, $30 billion will be provided for the high-tech production. Secondly, actually, preferential credit policy. This policy is going to be effectuated. Mid to high technologies are targeted, and preferentially, we are providing some incentives to the investors. So in these 8 spheres, we have more than 30 priority investment areas, which are quite immensely allocated by the state. So I'm not going to go into the details of every single one of them, but these are very valuable from the perspective of transformation in business. So from the preferential credit policy, we're going to have lira-based loans to be granted, so that the long-term conditions will be provided. They will be concessional loans. So the most critical part for us is to achieve the transformation in energy. When you look at the past 20 years, more than $900 billion was spent for energy export. So almost 1.5 folds of the current account deficit was spent for energy import. So this is why green transformation in energy business is not a luxury for Turkey. It's not something transient or fashionable to lean onto. This is a must for us. When it comes to structural reforms, they're quite comprehensive. On one side, we are investing in human capital. On the other side, we're exerting our best efforts to improve the investment climate in such a way to further develop capital markets so that the public finance reforms will take their place. The digital and green transformations are going to be there too. There's only one purpose for all of them: to increase the efficiency, to strengthen the ecosystem of innovations in such a way to increase our competitiveness, so that the growth potential of Turkey would be fulfilled. And we're very decided in doing so. As a matter of fact, there are great efforts exerting under the leadership of the president, the vice presidents, yes, under the economic coordination. of his, all of these efforts will be accelerated in 2025. That is why there is no reason to be pessimistic. On one hand, we have controlled the budget deficits. We are healing the wounds created by the earthquake. We're going to keep up with the Maastricht criteria. We don't have any debt problems. The current account deficit has been sorted out considerably. For the permanent solution arising from it, we are discussing on the structural transformation efforts. So all these efforts will be permanent thanks to the structural reforms. What's left? Inflation. So we do understand the concerns of Turkish people or our citizens on inflation. We do hear their complaints. Inflation is a huge problem, but there's not an easy solution for that. So if there would be an easier solution, the countries would have already discovered it. So unfortunately, we have to be decisive. We have to be patient. There's no other choice other than these two. So we're going to act patiently, decisively. We're going to implement this disinflation program. Hopefully, we will achieve. We're going to pave the way because the predictability will increase. You will have better access on finance. Thanks to the capital markets instruments, you would be able to finance your investments. Isn't it what you want? Of course, this is why we're kindly asking for your support, because in terms of inflation expectations, unfortunately, the real sector is trying to find its way. So the real inflation rate is below 50%, but the inflation expectations of the real sector is still there for the coming 12 months. In the coming 12 months, financial sector says that the inflation rate will be less than 17%, but the real sector has the expectation of 47%, which is not realistic. This is why, yes, inflation is really going down. This is what it's going to continue to do in 2025. It's going to accelerate its downwards momentum furthermore. So there's no problem in having population at the working age. Why? If we increase the women's participation to the labor force, we will generate jobs, employment in a long-term manner, thanks to the female participation to the labor market. We are way better in AI preparedness compared to the other countries, but we are going to invest in the infrastructure, AI infrastructure, and also the HR. We have a huge potential in services. I know that you want me to talk about tourism, but you will take 2 days to talk about tourism industry anyways. When you look at the table, you will see that, I mean, in the construction, in the global construction business, we're a huge player after China. So amongst the big ones, Turkey ranks the second. In the past 50 years, maybe you've noticed that already, there is a significant, I mean, out of 137 countries, more than $500 billion worth of projects have been implemented, and we have an immense potential in tourism. Let me get back to what I was saying. So once these wars would end, Turkey will be the flagship country in reconstructing those countries. We have covered a great distance thanks to your contributions in the field of tourism business. Thanks are not enough for you to appreciate what you have achieved. This is a huge success story. I mean, compared to what we used to do back in 1980s, we didn't have any place in the world tourism map, but today we rank the top 5 amongst the top 5, and we have a huge potential in healthcare tourism. It's improving so well. We have great health infrastructure. We're doing so well in tourism, so we have also covered great distances in this particular sector too. This is one of the biggest problems of the world, of course. High indebtedness is the biggest. The total indebtedness compared to GDP is 246. So if the interest rate is high, it is contributing so much in indebtedness. So when you take into consideration the debts of the banks, the household debts, etc., it's almost nothing. And being indebted is not a big hurdle. So is it obstructing Turkey's stance in terms of free trade agreements? We have free trade agreements with lots of countries, and this is equal to 60% of the exports. So almost in the global markets, we have concluded free trade agreements for the markets, which amount to $30 trillion. Even though there would be fragmentation, I mean, Turkey would definitely be affected by the fragmentation of the markets, but our resilience is much higher. Why? Because let's look at our geography. In the coming 50 to 100 years, which part of the world is going to grow? Because population is growing in Africa. It's going to be Africa. So we have developed markets like EU and Middle East. We're brotherly and sisterly with the Far East, and we have proximity to the North Africa, etc. So in terms of having supply, if we would have supply from the proximities, Turkey would perform much better. So Turkey is in a good situation. So there's no reason for you to be pessimistic. Year 2025, as I told you, so this is the macroeconomically speaking, budgetary, in terms of the budgets, things are optimistic because we're going to accelerate the reforms. We want to increase the efficiency. We want to increase the competitiveness. There's no other way of doing it. But thanks to you, thanks to the entrepreneurs like you, we are very optimistic because in the most difficult times you have invested in, you have shown your trust thanks to your investments. So the only thing that we will do is to pave the way for you in such a way to give support to you, which can be done thanks to disinflation. Thank you very much.